Well, hello there. This is Virtuoso Chess Noob learning and having fun with chess. The reversal, where maybe you're losing in the middle game, but through a clever tactical approach, you turn a game around. It's one of the most exciting things in a game of chess. I had one of those reversals in this game. This was a game played as a tournament within Team Australia. I was playing for the state of New South Wales, my opponent playing for Victoria. Those of you who know a little bit about Australia would know that there's a long-standing rivalry between New South Wales and Victoria, particularly between the capital cities, Sydney and Melbourne. Well, let's go take a look at this game. So I had the white pieces begin with e4, and my opponent plays probably one of my least favorite openings to play against, which is the modern defense with g6. It's quite tricky to play against, I find. You often get sort of positional games. It's a hyper-modern system. Now, the history of the modern defense is quite interesting. Now, if you've seen a few of my recent videos where my opponent plays a hypermodern, I've sort of talked about how very often we see these hypermodern openings first seen in the series of games in 1850 between John Cochrane and Banerjee. Banerjee being a very strong Indian player, and some of these hypermodern openings were sort of traditionally part of the Indian culture of playing chess. Now, Banerjee did play the modern quite a few times against John Cochrane, but John Cochrane had seen the modern opening, the modern defense before. About a decade earlier, in 1842, he played in London against Saint-Amant, who was probably the strongest French player of that time, possibly the strongest chess player in the world, actually. And Saint-Amant played the modern defense against him. And the modern had been played irregularly. It was known in the Western world in the 19th century. Now, the interesting thing here is that Saint-Amant also played against Cochrane's protege, which was Howard Staunton. And that's probably the series of matches which is better known. So Howard Staunton and Saint-Amant played some two sets of matches, once in London and then in Paris in 1843. And it was in that second series in Paris that people now consider kind of a de facto first world chess championship. Howard Staunton won that that match in Paris, and he was historically considered potentially one of the first world chess champions, even though that title didn't exist back in the mid 19th century. Have a look at my article that's linked to this video. The link is in the description. A little bit more information on that. Now, against the modern, usually I just play d4. No special tricks. The whole point here, of course, is fianchetto that bishop. Now with the attack, defended once, but I often like to defend also with the knight. Yep, very common. The other knight, knights before bishops. They now develop their knight. And here, because of that diagonal, I develop my bishop to pin their knight. So here, notice they've got two attackers. I've got two defenders, but I'm going to pin that knight, potentially captures, and then damaging their pawn structure. So bishop, that's very much expected. And now I develop this bishop. So now we've got three defenders over defend. They develop their other knight, perhaps getting ready to short castle, makes sense. And now I push d5 with an attack on the knight. And the thing here is it's not entirely obvious where that knight should go, because it can't come here, obviously, because it's just going to get taken. Now here it doesn't look like it's necessarily the best place, here on the edge of the board. And in fact, Stockfish says the best place for the knight in this position is to envelop back to b8. Pretty difficult to see. Now, when I played this, I expected that they were probably going to push their knight into the center, onto e5. That's what they did. I was very happy with that, because after captures, and they capture back with the pawn, the doubled e-pawns, but more than that, this e5 pawn buttressed against my e4 pawn blocks in that long dark square diagonal. And so that really reduces one of the tactical resources that black has with that fianchetto bishop. Makes it less scary. I'm very happy. Nice for me. Now, I knew in this position I was doing well, possibly ahead, but it wasn't entirely obvious to me what was the best next move. And here we should see some of the difficulties playing against the modern defense. I eventually played queen to d2, which was a mistake. My idea was to form a battery along that diagonal, but it's not really necessary because this bishop is, kind of hemmed in, kind of stuck, and, can't really play that move. And the problem with this, the reason why it's a mistake, is that black can just take my bishop after I capture back with the knight. It's no longer defending the e4 pawn, and I hang that pawn. Knight can capture, which is why here it's about -1. It is a mistake. It is a difficult position, and happily for me, black didn't see it either. They decided to push their knight forward with an attack. Obviously, here, I thought I was okay to trade that. I'd long castle. I was expecting that there was still short castle, and opposite side castling makes for exciting games. The capture. Here I captured back with a pawn, less accurate. Capturing with queen is best, but I was worried that I might potentially in the future face a pin, and so I took with the pawn. Wasn't the most accurate, but I thought, look, opening up an f-file is potentially good for me, I thought. They now short castles, and here I found the correct tactical approach, at least in this move, which was to push the h-pawn and then try to destabilize the defense of their king. The bishop makes sense, but I can block with my own bishop. They sort of developed the queen. Here I should have doubled down and pushed this way, because here this is very good for me. If they take, I can take, it doesn't really work for them. I can take this way because, it's quite a good position. Now, I don't see that here. And so I make a few shuffling moves, thinking, what am I going to do? I thought, look, I'm going to try to rotate maybe my knight this way. That's what I thought. But these are inaccuracies. I should have just pushed my h-pawn, double down with that tactic. So they're trying to expand on the queen side. Here, extra defender, on that h5 square. That's too late because black can just take that square themselves and no longer any good. Knight's kind of in the wrong place. I was thinking rotating it back, maybe there'll be an attack this way, but it's just too slow. I'm losing tempo. I capture here, and that capture was due to miscalculation. Because after the black queen takes the infiltrate, suddenly all these pawns are a little bit soft on my king side. And here I try to scramble, try to make an attack, but it just doesn't quite work. Now they've got an attack here as well. Here, trying to get something, but it's just not quite working. There we go. That was hanging. And here, try to defend. They take. Try to chase their queen. There we go. Chase, but they got their queen out. Kick their queen, but you can see it's +2. White is up a couple of points of material. Okay, so what to do here? So I take that pawn. They kick my queen this way. Captures. They capture the rook. We simplify. And now I have a problem. At this point, this really crystallized in my mind that I was losing. That I was in a losing position. We had simplified. They've got 3 pieces left, queen and rook and the bishop. I've got the queen and rook and a knight as well. They've got this very, very strong attack, a pawn majority. Maybe I'm lucky in that bishop at the moment is not very active. Here I knew I had a problem. And because there aren't many pieces left, I need to make a counterattack. If you don't counterattack, it's just going to be a slow, inexorable, lingering death as the game continues to simplify down. All right, so first thing, I defend this way. Now, I think Stockfish actually suggests defending something like this. Obviously, there's a potential mate threat right here. So that rook first. That does cause a problem because there's always this back rank issue. Black now plays a very powerful move. They move their bishop onto this other diagonal, hanging. That looks like a hanging pawn, and if they take it, it pins my rook. It's a real problem. I have to do something, and I'm thinking, no, what do I do here? What do I do? And I think Stockfish actually suggests allowing the bishop to capture and pushing one of these pawns. Effectively, it's giving up, just trying to drag out the checkmate, the loss, as long as possible. However, when you're already losing, you're losing. It doesn't matter whether you lose quickly or you lose slowly. Losing is losing. So what I needed to do is to do something tricky, unexpected, audacious, where we're also getting some sort of counterplay, some sort of counterattack. And so I played this very tricky move, which Stockfish thinks is quite inaccurate. It's a mistake, but I thought this was quite clever. So knight here to block that diagonal for the bishop. Now this is not a good move because the simplest thing that black can do is just to trade. It's completely fine for them. Potentially maybe they can even do something like that and just take that pawn. However, notice that even though they're upper point material, that's in the form of a pawn. Piecewise, I've got 3 pieces, they've got 3 pieces. Black knows that they're winning. I know that they're winning, but they know that they're winning as well. And there is a cognitive bias known as loss aversion. So when you're winning, when you're ahead, you can get into a state of play, a state of mind where you become really hesitant, really resistant to losing material. So that's what the loss aversion is. So I had a hunch, I just had an intuition that black was not going to trade their bishop for my knight. Even though that's perfectly good for them, they'll end up with a outside pass pawn. I just had a sense they didn't want to do that because we notionally have an equal number of pieces. And if they don't do that, then now I've got 2 attackers on their f7 pawn, very, very powerful. Potentially I'm inviting them to blunder because if they accidentally push their f pawn forward, queen to h7 with check, extremely powerful move. And in fact, if they did do that, there's a mate apparently in 11, according to Stockfish. So here, I'm really inviting them to make a mistake. This is not accurate. It's making my position worse, but I was losing anyway. And this gives me a counterattack. And I was right. They didn't take, they decided to chase my queen, using this to defend that f-pawn. I give a check. King now moved into this position. That's good. Let's see. Potentially notice there is now a fork. So a knight move can potentially cause a check. So here I play another audacious, tricky move. It's a mistake. Again, you can see black much further into the advantage, but once again attacking the f-pawn, rook f2. And here, one of the things when your opponent thinks that they've sidestepped a trap, sidestepped a mistake, they can sometimes lose sight of the fact that there may be a new trap, a new attack in the same position. And this is what happened in this game. Black thought they sidestepped the attack. Looks like that's defended twice, attacked twice. It looks like it's not going to work. And so they don't do anything about this attack. They decide to move their queen to the c5 square. I think what they were thinking was that this pawn is pinned to my rook. They can't really even move that. Well, they can't really even move that pawn. And if they move there, if I move my rook, then either I'm no longer defending that pawn, or I'm not attacking that pawn. That's what they were thinking. But this is a blunder. It completely changes things because now I have a rook sacrifice. A rook captures the pawn in f7. It's a brilliant move with check. And notice, in fact, that the king is, if they don't get rid of that rook, it's mate. Queen covers the entire back rank. Check, can't escape here, can't escape here. Forced move, black must capture my rook with their rook. And now there is a royal fork. Absolutely lovely. It's a reversal from losing to somewhat ahead. Check, capture the queen. Very, very lovely. Now, it's not the end of the game. It's not the end of the game. Black still has some chances because bishop captures. It's an absolute fork. And I have to move my king. One move. That's the only move, because if I moved it into this position, that would be back rank mate. Have to be careful. Rook and bishops synergize very well. They take the knight. Capture. And here, need to continue to be careful. Check. I have to move into that position. If I move into this position or this position, move on to the E file, then that would be a pin of my queen against the king. Have to be careful. All right, with an attack. Here I moved my queen in this position because I have to defend. The queen has to have vision on that critical f4 square here, because otherwise that would be check. King would be forced onto b1 because the d file is covered, and then a rook potentially to d1 would be back rank mate. Still need to be very careful. They push a pawn, fantastic. I move a pawn, always now an escape square, absolutely fantastic. It's a light square. The bishop cannot control that square. I'm now removed the risk of a back rank checkmate. All right, that's fine. Captures, move my king forward. They try to attack the queen, that's fine. Move it into this position. Looks like they want to attack my pawn, that's fine. Queen forward, always be careful. Don't end up with a pin. They give a check, king here, and I thought here they're gonna play rook to h2, aren't they? That's what they did. Looks like they've got two attackers on that pawn. But the thing is, queens are just so powerful in the endgame because of their mobility. And because this was a daily format game, I had plenty of time to really try to calculate things through. This is a blunder because I now have queen to a7, and it's a check. And lots of arrows here. But fundamentally, the king must either go to the 8th rank, or it must go onto the h6 square. In both of those positions, I will end up getting an absolute fork, because if they go onto either of these squares onto the 8th rank, then queen to b8 will be an absolute fork of the king and rook, and I'll win the rook. If the king moves to h6, which is what they did, I now have queen all the way to e3, and it's an absolute fork this way, and I win the bishop. And even better, I still cover my h4 pawn. If they give a check, that's fine. Slip it here, slip it there. They move their king again, doesn't work, and I hit them with the same tactic. Queen e3, check. They're basically going to be forced onto the 7th rank, and now I give that check once again, and here I can take that pawn. Take the pawn. They try to give a check, and now I block the check. They try to, I'm thinking that they wanted to control to potentially help something with the pushing of the pawn, because their two pawns, their last hope really, but that's an error. You could probably even see the fork already. Queen to f4, absolute fork, king and rook, and in this position my opponent opted to resign because all hope is lost. Good game, GG. The big takeaway from this game is to not be afraid to play aggressive, speculative moves when you are losing, especially if it creates complications and some tactical resources that allow for a counterattack. Your opponent is much more likely to blunder a reversal if you create the scenarios and the opportunities for them to blunder. I hope you enjoyed this video and thanks for watching.